Hello, and welcome to your first assignment, Objects and Meaning, in which you're going to create an object-based journal. I will get into that in a little more detail at the end of this video, but first we're going to be introduced to three artists who use objects in their artwork to transform the meaning, the history, the sensation of that object into a conceptual art piece. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch a video by Theaster Gates. This is one of my favorite artists, and he is an artist in Chicago who works with collections and things to tell a bigger story. So first we're going to watch this video about him, and then I will show you a little bit more of his work.
I should have prepared for you guys more. Things are a little unruly. Yeah, right in the same line right here. I have this keen interest in not just like autonomous, like singular objects, but whole collections of things. Part of the reason I think I'm attracted to collections is because they constitute one person's or one institution's way of seeing the world. And it's like this little time capsule of things that were important to someone. And so I spend a lot of time looking for the personality of people within their collections, and then maybe even trying to tease out in a collection why those things are important. So the first collection that I received is Prairie Avenue Bookstore, which was an architectural history bookstore in downtown Chicago. The second collection I purchased was Dr. Wax. It was a record store in Hyde Park, which is the neighborhood on the south side. I don't know how many albums, 6,000, 8,000, a lot of albums. And the third collection was at the University of Chicago's glass lantern slides. I'm using the glass slides to like teach art history sometimes. Sometimes I include them as part of works of art, or they become the works of art themselves in the case of the Jet magazines. I've taken an amazing canon of Johnson Publishing magazines. This is Jet magazine. We had about 12,000 unbound periodicals. I have been binding them and color coding them by decade. It's exciting, this body of work, because it gets to ask questions about monochrome painting. When they're functioning as a monochrome painting, they're not necessarily functioning like an archive. But in fact, my hope is that the history and the content that's loaded inside the books will be waiting for people to unearth it. As the magazine, it was making the work of the present. It wasn't attempting to make an archive. But it's so amazing that these bound volumes constitute the 1990s. And it's a very particular 1990s Black American experience. And I feel really fortunate to have been able to bind these things and then to make them present in the world again. Right now, we're working on archiving this hardware store. The hardware store was, again, kind of like Dr. Wax. This amazing guy, Ken, had owned it for 30 years, and he was retiring. We loved his building, but we loved the stuff. And so we bought the entire hardware store in changing neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, neighborhoods where a big box like Home Depot might move in. What do you do with Ken's legacy? How do you catalog the everyday, especially as the phenomena of the everyday is changing? And is this another way of tracking Black space? Black, not necessarily just about Black people, but about forgotten people. It's a space where things have stopped growing. And then maybe it's also like the void. Like resources go in and you're not sure where they go. Black space. galactic space. These are the things that I'm working with. I'm having a lot of fun looking at these objects both as sculptural objects and as objects that have the potential to create new sculptural works. It's the thing, and it's the thing that makes the thing.
As you saw, Theaster Gates often uses objects that are from a collection of like decommissioned space, or buildings that are being, or people have collected something and they're giving it away, or companies even have collected it. And there's a lot of decommissioned space in the south side of Chicago. So in one such opportunity, Theaster Gates received a bunch of fire hoses. And he sewed them together to create things that really reference minimalist art. This is Agnes Martin, and she is a minimalist artist, and you can kind of see the reference or the similarity. There is, however, a even more important meaning that and reference point that Theaster Gates is using. And so I was able to see an interview where he talked about these works, and he is also referencing, or more importantly, referencing the civil rights movement and how fire hoses, were turned on African American protesters during the civil rights movement as a weapon, or the fire department was weaponized. And so I'm sure you've seen this image before, but it's just to kind of hit home that what he is doing with an object and how he is relating to the object as both what it is materiality, it as a sort of color field or beautiful thing to look at, and then also as a symbol of oppression, or a symbol of a greater system of inequity. So the next artist we're going to talk about is Christian Boltanski. He is a famous French artist. He was born in 1944. And he uses objects in his work, photos, pieces of clothing, rusted tins, that give a voice to an absent subject. And they sort of are very meditative and very contemplative. On the Ocular Contemporary Art website, they give a really great biography of him that I'm going to just read word for word. According to the artist, while individual memories might prove to be fragile, they are still filled with the truthful yet unique values, making it the reason why he has often been choosing daily items, such as main creative elements, to construct an archive of humanity. His artistic work revolves around the themes memory, death, and loss. Relics are no longer those of saints, but vestiges of anonymous people, traces of strangers, with which it seems to be a question of communicating. Since the 1960s, he has worked with the ephemera of the human experience, from obituary photographs to rusted biscuit tins. So, like that said, his work has a very memorial feel, but it has no specific person that's being named. It's just these sort of communal feelings of archive, memory, and often of loss. One of the things he also does is create these large installations, often with heaps of clothing, can sort of set up in very different ways, but these large rooms that have a tremendous amount of clothing, and they always, to me at least, evoke the sense of genocide, of sort of mass loss of human life. And that could be contributed to, and often he talks about, he was a child of a Christian mother and a Jewish father, and so in Paris during the Nazi occupation, his father, when he was very young, his father, to survive, had to hide under the floorboards of their house. And so he was very affected naturally by death and loss of being a child of war and a child of a Jewish parent during that time. So the next artist we're going to talk about is actually a Pacific Northwest artist, Marie Watt. She's based in Portland. And she, I'm going to read her statement. It's actually in third person, but it's what she's written on her website. Her work draws from history, biography, proto-feminism, and indigenous principles, and addresses the interaction of the arc of history with the intimacy of memory. She uses materials that are conceptually attached to narrative, in particular exploring the stories connected with commonplace woolen blankets, cedar, and iron. So I'm going to show you mostly her works with blankets, or wholly her works with blankets. She is an indigenous or a Native American artist, based, as I said, in Portland. And so what you're seeing right now is a construction of blankets, just of different blankets put together. And she has a lot of work like this that is looks very much like a painting or some kind of abstract work. But she also does projects where she works with people, and she asks different communities. She'll go to a gallery or a museum and ask communities or people to bring in blankets, and they'll sit down and they'll write the story of the blanket on a tag, and then she'll attach that tag to the blanket. In this installation you're seeing, she's even blown the tags up and put them on the wall so that you can read them as art pieces themselves. And so each blanket then has a story and represents a person, but as they're presented in this column, they also sort of stand in for a collective memory, this sort of shared human experience that we all have. She's also done it to, like in this particular piece, which was commissioned by the United States Department Office of Art and Embassies for the new embassy in Islamabad. She uses and collects stories, or uses this to signify the historical significance of textiles in the early Muslim world, often characterized as having been a textile society. So she uses this sort of language and history of textiles to symbolize something else. And as someone who is a fiber artist, I can say that there's a lot of meaning. You often buy a sweatshirt, but after you've worn that sweatshirt for a while, it tends to wear out in certain ways that are specific to you, and like how you drag your arm across the table, or if you drink coffee and constantly spill it on you, or some our clothing carries marks of our existence, and so they tend to become their own archives or stand-ins for us. And so textiles often are something that carry a lot of history and meaning, but so does paper, just sort of discarded bits, rocks, all of these different objects. It's amazing how you can come across things and put it into a certain context that can mean so much more. I've included this last artist, Kevin Beasley, because I am myself still learning about his artwork. He's fairly new to the art world, and although he's definitely a star, you're going to watch him getting ready for an art show at the Whitneys, so he is very established. But in this next clip, he talks about how, about context, and how putting objects and using those objects in different contexts change their meaning and create something new, or something that references a much bigger thing than the object itself. And I thought that was a really poignant way to describe what I'm trying to get across to you in this presentation and in your assignment.
There's not going to be a beginning.
I think that's enough to start.
So right now, I've been putting a lot of energy into an exhibition at the Whitney, which is my first sort of major solo exhibition here in the city. So the project is multiple parts. There is a sound installation that is rooted around a cotton gin motor and 3 large sculptural works. The work really comes out of an experience I had at a family reunion in Valentines, Virginia in the summer of 2011. I drove down from New Haven, and the property has a sort of meandering road, right, that leads to the house. And I look up and I see the fields are planted. And I stopped the car and I looked, and I was like, well, what is that? And I rolled the window down and I saw that it was cotton. And it kind of, it struck me in a way that I couldn't quite wrap my head around. Emotionally, it was too heavy. Mentally, it was too heavy. I felt like I hadn't reconciled something. And I was like, why am I so mad at this plant? You know, like what, this plant is not doing anything other than like growing and being beautiful. And I felt like, okay, there's a lot of unpacking that has to happen.
You know, I want to actually point to this cotton here. This here has all been ginned. This is all cotton from Virginia, Valentines, Virginia.
Using cotton, raw cotton, as material is really important because as materially oriented as I am, it's all because there is a context for those materials. For the exhibition, there will be 3 large sculptural works. I've been calling them slabs because of their relationship to architecture. They're made from wildly different materials.
This is a sweater. It's a Yale cotton, really nice preppy sweater. And then these are some do-rags, some blue ones. For this, they're gonna kind of represent like a river or some sort of flowing water.
Every material has some sort of history or life that it's lived. They become ways of telling stories.
So this is a collar from my cap and gown when I graduated from Yale.
When I think about cotton, it takes me everywhere. You know, you think about politics, you think about like social relationships you have, you think about economics, reparations, you know, it's just like, it all just unfolds and is like laid out.
These pages come from an atlas of the transatlantic slave trade. And it's remarkable that these records have been kept for so long and in such detail, but it's also indicative of trade and commerce. You keep track of every single thing, every movement, because there's money and there's capital involved. But these were bodies.
Being a Black person in this, current state, that's what you're encouraged to do, is to kind of like move on. Like, okay, there's been time, there's been space, right? It's a false narrative, but it also is one that you feel the pressure from. So I think that to me is an essential aspect of making sculpture. You have to deal with its materiality. These works, I think, they demand that. They demand you to confront them because they're confronting you. I was searching for a cotton gin. I had cotton, and I was thinking maybe I could make t-shirts or I could make garments. And I went on eBay searching for like a small handheld, hand crank thing. And the first thing I came across was an ad for this large cotton gin motor. And I felt like it was telling me what I needed to do. The cotton gin was invented by Eli Whitney in 1794. What it does is it separates the fibers from the seeds, which was the most time-consuming part for slaves. People thought that it would decrease the number of slaves, but it actually had the opposite effect. because more land was acquired, plantations got larger. It actually increased the number of slaves. The cotton gin motor is encased in a soundproof glass chamber, and primarily came out of this decision to sort of be able to experience and see the motor running and not hear it. That came out of a conversation with the former owner, where when I asked him about what it sounded like, he couldn't articulate. He didn't have the words to really describe that sound, and it was really something that you had to experience for yourself. Okay. Sound has always been important to me, and it has increasingly become a way for me to process the world. Sound is just as physical and tactile as any other material. How do you deliver that physicality or that tactility of something you can't see or something that you don't feel in a traditional way? It shakes your insides, right? Like you feel the vibrations. Do people want to sit and listen to this? Do they want to take the time to consider what that sound is and where it's coming from? I'm interested in people asking what their relationship is to this material. To see a wall of cotton that comes from a really specific place, the American South, just to think about what their relationship is to that. And how do they feel implicated, if at all? Are we really taking the time to process and understand these things? So I think setting up a scenario where people can take the time is as much as I can really offer.
So for this first project, we're going to start our journal, and we're going to do a little project that's just kind of a meditation on objects and meanings. So you have plastic bags, you've been given a journal, and you've been given these plastic baggies, and those are so that if you want to, you can collect some very small objects. Even a flat piece of paper can be used in a sculptural way and can be an object. So you can get some very low profile, some flat objects. You're going to do 3 of these entries, or you can do a sketch of an object, or you can take a photograph and post the photograph in your journal. So you have 3 different ways that you can record that object with some kind of visible, in some kind of visible way. So once again, you can either collect that object, a little piece of it, as you've seen me doing in this video. You can do a sketch, a drawing of it, or you can attach a photograph in your journal of it. And then you're going to write the date and about 3 sentences, between 3 and 5 sentences that talk about that object, how it came to be in your life, what does it mean, why is it important. So this particular image that you're seeing is something I did back in the beginning of the fall trimester, and it was kind of something I totally forgot about, which is, ironically enough, I caught some thyme, because I had been boiling thyme. It's very good for cleaning the air. This was when we had all the smoke from the forest fires, and it was really warm, so it was kind of tricky because you wanted to have your windows open, but you didn't. And it was very, very smoky, and the air was really bad. And so I was boiling thyme on the stove to try to clean the air in my house. And so, because I had a bunch of it around, I put it in this baggie, and I actually wound up using this object in a way tells me a little bit about a piece of history not so long ago, but I'd even kind of forgotten about. So here I am just kind of writing down. It's really helpful to make your drawing or your photograph or your object to attach it to the left side of the page, and you can either tape it in, you can staple it in, use whatever medium you want to draw, or however you want to attach the photograph. That's really up to you. But then you're just going to write a couple of sentences so that it's a journal entry that reminds you what this object is, how it came into your life, and what it means. And there you go. You're going to do this 3 times. Okay, so project 1, object and meaning. Assignment, create 3 journal entries that record an object and its meaning to you. So that's 3 different journal entries with 3 different objects. You may collect a small object and place it in one of the small bags that came with your kit and either tape or staple it to the page. Or you may make a sketch of the object directly on the page. Or you may print out a photograph and glue it on the page. So that's 3 different ways to record the object. You may choose, you can mix it up. For the photograph option, you need to be able to print out a photograph and place it on the page. So if you don't have a printer that will do that, go ahead and make a quick sketch or collect the actual object in the baggie. Then you're going to record the date, meaning you just write the date on the page next to it, and write 3 to 5 sentences about what the object is, how it came into your life, and if there is any event or memory associated with it. So that's 3 to 5 sentences total, just telling us a little bit about this thing that you've collected. Then you're going to share all 3 entries in Flipgrid in the week 2 folder. So you're going to go back to the week 2 folder, find that Flipgrid, and then you're going to make a video of yourself showing each entry and please do read the text because it will be very difficult to see on the video. So make sure that you hold it up so I can see it, and that you also read the text so that I can hear what each entry is. That will all be due by class next week. So next Monday/Tuesday. All right, have fun.